What is the most immature thing you've seen an adult do? My mother has told me stories about how the older people she works with will act like children if they don't like you. They laugh and snicker behind your back or as you pass. The most ridiculous, though, she saw someone sit at their table. They didn't like this person. So they all stood up, moved over a table, and sat down, then laughed obnoxiously at the lonely person. How old do you gotta be to grow up?
Sounds like people can be pretty petty, even as they get older. It's strange how some never really mature or learn to treat others kindly. I guess cliques don't really go away, they just change forms. It must be frustrating to witness that kind of behavior in the workplace. You'd think they'd know better by now, but maybe not everyone grows up in the same way.
A couple that we were good friends with are constantly having money issues. He works a full-time job, so does she, and he does odd jobs on the side for extra cash. Lots of the odd jobs are things that she sets up. On the regular, she gets mad at him for working all the time and not spending enough time at home with her / kids. So, to get back at him, she goes on a shopping spree buying a bunch of shit they don't need. I am completely baffled at the lack of logic and overall immaturity.
It's interesting how people handle stress in relationships. These friends seem to be caught in a cycle. He's working hard to support the family while she feels neglected, so her solution is to go shopping. It just creates more problems. It's like they don't communicate properly. I've seen it happen with others too. Instead of solving issues, they just make things worse. Makes you wonder if they even realize the impact.
I went with my dad to a local pizza restaurant in town. Behind my dad, I could see a young girl's birthday party going on. The little girl was talking with her friends, and the mother kept tugging at the young girl's sleeve to get her attention. The girl was so into her conversation that she wasn't responding. So the mother takes the water pitcher and dumps it out onto the table. Some people, more so the people in my hometown, shouldn't have kids.
It's interesting how some parents handle things. I once saw a similar situation at a cafe where a kid was just absorbed in their friends. The parent was getting frustrated and started making a scene. It's wild to think about how some adults manage stress around kids. Not every parent seems equipped for it, you know? Just makes you wonder about the whole thing.
I used to work with developmentally disabled adults. I took this one guy, Jeff, out to Friendly's for lunch. He is autistic with ADHD and Tourette's. You can clearly tell he is a disabled young adult at the time. He would rock a little and sometimes have vocal tics saying innocuous things like yeah or hoo-hoo. Most people clearly make an exception on social conduct when you see a disabled person. The guy in back of us, mid-40s-50-ish, the other side of the booth began to rock super hard, banging the back of Jeff's seat and imitating him because he was annoyed while trying to enjoy his $7.99 lunch. I have to say, Jeff wasn't the one getting dirty looks that day from other customers.
It's interesting how some people react in social situations. I remember a time when I was out with a friend who had some quirks too. We got stares, but not for the reasons you'd expect. It was the others who were uncomfortable, trying too hard to fit in. Watching their reactions made it clear who really shouldn't be judging anyone. Sometimes, it's just about being decent, you know?
While picking my daughter up from grade school, saw a woman call 911 on another parent because she couldn't get into her driver's side door on her car because she said the guy parked too close to her. Guy was parked perfectly legally in his slot. Woman was obese, and she, while parked legally, was very close to the line on the driver's side. She yelled at and berated the guy for a few minutes, then loudly announced she was calling 911. She did, and the poor guy backed down and moved his car.
That's one of those situations that makes you just shake your head. It's a shame how some people handle frustrations. Instead of finding a solution, she just escalated things. It's odd how a small parking issue turned into a scene like that. I guess the guy just didn't want to deal with it, and moving seemed easier. Sometimes it's better to just let it go than to engage in drama.
Just the other day, on a 3-hour airplane trip, a lady in my row, probably 55 or so, sat scooted forward with her knees in the back of the seat in front of her for about 30 minutes and ate through an entire bag of Reese's miniatures that smelled old. She was texting on her phone well into takeoff, didn't even turn the ringer off to hide it. Also, when there was a problem with the sky bridge at the end of the flight and they couldn't let us off right away, she called the airline's customer service to ask, "How can I get off the plane?"
That sounds like quite the trip. It can be interesting to see how people act in those cramped airplane settings. The lady really didn't seem to care about the usual flight etiquette. I guess some folks just do their own thing, regardless of what's going on around them. The customer service call at the end is a classic move. Always someone looking for answers, even in a less than ideal situation.
Since I am far more capable of judging myself than others, this one is all about me. I definitely got into an argument with a 5-year-old, like a real, legitimate argument, where I was getting mad at her because her point was so false and she couldn't see it. And I had to step back and say to myself, "Crazy whirlyjig, relax. This kid is 5, and this is the stupidest thing you've done in a while." So I backed off, but still stayed pissed off at this kid for a while. So she may be 5, but I definitely act like I am.
It's funny how we can get caught up in the moment. I remember a similar time when I argued with my little cousin over something trivial. I was all worked up, trying to prove my point, and then it hit me. This kid doesn't care about being right. I just had to let it go. Sometimes, we all act like kids, even when we know better. It's a reminder to chill out now and then.
A 60-plus man got out of his car on the road when we laid on our horn after he ran us into oncoming traffic just to get one car ahead in traffic. He could have merged behind us, where no one was, but was determined to cut dangerously close to us, so when his lane ended, he just moved on over. That forced us to hop into the oncoming lane to not get hit. We were pissed, so we absolutely laid on the horn for about 30 seconds. He stops his car, gets out, and starts walking towards our car. We got to get around him, but he hopped back in and jumped back in front of us.
That's wild. Can't believe he thought getting out would solve anything. It just made him look worse. People can be really reckless, especially in traffic. It's like they forget that it's not just a game. Thankfully, you managed to get around him. It's crazy how a small decision can turn into such a tense situation. Glad you got out okay. Hope you didn't let it ruin your day too much.
The manager in my building won't acknowledge my existence because he yelled at me once for doing my job, and I told him to chill out and talk to me like an adult. Anytime I need him to do something, I have to ask my boss, who doesn't work in my city, to send him an email. I work about 100 feet away from this manager, so it makes everything difficult.
That sounds pretty frustrating. It's awkward to deal with someone like that, especially when you have to ask for help through someone else. Having to go through all those steps just to get basic things done can be a real hassle. It's tough when a little conflict turns into a big barrier at work. Just trying to do your job, and now it's a whole process. That's just the way it goes sometimes.
Worked with a woman who was in her 40s/early 50s. She started a rumor that I was having an affair with a co-worker. She got the information because she had asked if I had made it home due to the large fire that had the freeway closed. Told her I was delayed 2 hours and had called a few people, the co-worker I allegedly slept with included. She figured since I had called and we were sleeping together. That woman had a lot of problems.
Sounds like a real mess. It's wild how some people can twist things like that. You just got caught in some rumor mill. It's strange when someone projects their issues onto others. We all have our stuff to deal with, but starting gossip only makes it worse. People can be so quick to judge without knowing the whole story. Just glad you didn't let it get to you too much.
Probably not the most ridiculous, but the most recent in my mind. In the women's bathrooms at my work, and to specify, this is a huge building with about 2,000 people in it. There are 2 shelves, one on each side of the sinks. On these shelves are toilet paper, pads, toilet seat covers, and tampons. One morning I walked in, and there were signs up on both sides in red ink saying, "Do not move the supplies around there in their specific spots for a reason. Also, do not remove signs." I rolled my eyes. These were clearly not put up with any authority, and moved on. 2 hours later, I'm back in a bathroom, and not only are the signs nowhere to be seen, but every single item is in a different spot than it had been. Every single thing. I was torn between rolling my eyes harder and laughing at the immaturity of some people.
It's funny how people take bathroom supplies so seriously. I mean, who thought rearranging toilet paper could cause a fuss? I've seen similar things at work. Someone once made a fuss over coffee placement in the break room. It's just everyday stuff, but people treat it like it's a big deal. I guess in a large place, little things can feel more significant, but come on, it's just supplies.
I work in retail. Most of the time, the parents throw more tantrums and fits than their actual children. It's super embarrassing for me and their kids. A lot of time the kids come up to me later, usually teens, and apologize. It's weird. How can you raise a kid that polite and mature, yet you yourself throw a hissy fit if we ran out a certain color or size?
It's funny how some adults act worse than kids in stores. I've seen parents get upset over small things, while their kids just seem to roll their eyes. It's a strange dynamic for sure. When a kid comes up to say sorry, you can tell they've been taught better manners. It makes you wonder about their upbringing and how they really feel watching their parents. Kids just want peace like the rest of us.
I babysit for my old high school teacher. Every time her kids come home with a folder sign, she will immediately defend her kid. The kid gets a bad grade? What a bad teacher. The kid gets a folder sign for reading during instructions? Only my kid would get in trouble for reading. She would rant about teachers to me constantly instead of realizing that her kids are brats. The most ironic thing about this whole situation is that she is a teacher herself and deals with students that greatly resemble her own kids on a daily basis. She's also always full of excuses and nothing is ever her fault, a lot like her kids. I'd go without being paid for months.
It's interesting how some people can't see their own flaws. This teacher constantly defends her kids, ignoring their behavior. She's in the same position she complains about, yet she never connects the dots. I remember babysitting for her and just listening to her excuses. It's wild how apparent it is to an outsider, but she seems blinded by her own bias. I guess family can make you see things differently, even when they're wrong.
A woman volunteer who worked in the school cafeteria would chew big wads of bubble gum, then blow a huge bubble until it finally burst all over her face, or someone would prick it. At first it was kind of funny, but she did it too regularly and eventually was asked to leave because she refused to stop while working on food preparation.
Reminds me of a guy I knew in high school. He had this weird habit of eating chips while trying to help in the kitchen. No big deal at first, but he did it every day, and crumbs ended up everywhere. Teachers finally told him to stop or get out. Kind of funny looking back, but I guess some people don't realize when enough is enough.
I don't remember this story because I was only about 2 years old, maybe younger, but I was playing on this tiny basketball hoop and shooting a ball into it while my parents were visiting with my uncle and aunt. My uncle then decided to block my shot to the hoop. I laughed at the first couple of times he did it, but he kept on doing it and would not let me score. My dad was there watching the whole thing and could see me getting visibly frustrated and upset because he would not let me make one shot for like 5 straight minutes. He finally said to my uncle, "All right, that's enough, quit blocking a shot." I took another shot after that, and this time my uncle emphatically blocked it. My dad then lost it and tackled him to the ground. He cocked his fist back to punch him, but my aunt and mom were able to hold him back in time. All the while, my uncle is screaming, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." My uncle has always been a man-child, but this is the story that my parents told me that sticks out the most.
That's a pretty wild story for such a young age. It's funny how things can escalate so quickly, especially with family. Your uncle probably thought it was all in good fun, but it seems like your dad had enough of it. It's good that your mom and aunt were there to calm things down. It's some kind of weird family bonding experience, I guess, just showing how competitive everyone can be, even with a toddler.
My sister's husband refused to buy any Christmas gifts for his stepdaughter because she was not his. Instead, he bought their 3 children about $500 each worth of gifts: iPods, iPads, video games, etc. Then he told his kids, my niece's half-siblings, that they weren't allowed to share with their older half-sister.
That's a tough situation. It's hard to see someone treat a child differently just because of their background. It puts a strain on family relationships. Kids can pick up on this kind of behavior, and it can affect their feelings of belonging. It's a shame to let material things create division during what should be a festive time. Can't imagine how awkward holidays must be for everyone involved.
One day, I was walking to the train from work, and down the street towards me was coming a middle-aged couple that seemed to be arguing. The woman seemed to be berating the man for something. As I get closer to them, she spots me, glances at the man, and then shrieks at me like some kind of demented 14-year-old. "My boyfriend thinks you're fat and ugly," and then she goes storming past me. I hear the guy say, "Really?" to her like an exasperated parent, and neither of them bother apologizing to me for the behavior. I was really tempted to throw my coffee at her, but I didn't because I wanted to finish it. I was tired.
That's a wild encounter. It's awkward when strangers pull you into their drama. The woman's outburst was unnecessary, for sure. You handled it well, though. I get the urge to react, but sometimes it's better to just walk away. Finishing your coffee sounds more satisfying than wasting it on someone else's issues. It's just another day dealing with people, I guess.
While me and my girlfriend were at the doctor's waiting to be seen, this guy was sitting there mumbling to himself as if he was angry at something. Every time someone got called to be seen, and it wasn't him, he would completely lose his shit. He'd be like, "Man, I've been here for such a long time. Why is it taking so long?" Or, "I was here before that lady. Why does she get TO go before me?" Or, "You GH man, of course, it's not me." This guy was at least in his mid-30s, and honestly, it was the most immature thing I have ever seen in my life.
I remember waiting at the DMV once. This dude next to me was just losing it because he thought he should be called first. Every minute he'd say something louder about how unfair it was. People were just trying to mind their business while he started pacing around. It was kind of wild how some people can't handle waiting. Just made me appreciate the calm moments more. Some things just don't change.
My great-grandmother was notorious for throwing childish temper tantrums. One Halloween when I was pretty young, we went trick-or-treating. My mom and grandmother promised my great-grandmother that we would stop by. Well, we were late, so we were greeted by an 80-plus-year-old woman who literally laid on the porch, kicking and screaming like a 2-year-old while my brother and I laughed our fool heads off. This wasn't a symptom of age or senility, either. At the time, she was sharp as a tack and had thrown these kinds of fits her entire life.
That's a wild story. It's funny how age doesn't always mellow people out. Your great-grandmother sounds like a character for sure. It must have been pretty entertaining to see her like that, especially on Halloween. I guess some things just don't change, no matter how old you get. Those little moments with family can be the most memorable. Just goes to show, everyone has their quirks.
A group of people in building made plans to go get lunch together. All of a sudden, we heard laughter and saw part of the group take off out the back door. I walk over to the window to see what's going on, and 4 of the 9 of us are running down the street like they were being chased. Come to find out, our boss didn't like one of the guys in the group, so his idea was to grab a few employees and run off to get there first, so he could eat and get done before the rest of us got there.
That's kind of funny. It's wild how competitive people can get over lunch. I guess some just want to avoid the crowd or get away from someone they don't like. It's a little childish, but I get the feeling of wanting to have a peaceful meal without drama. The boss probably didn't think it through. In the end, everyone's just trying to eat and have a good time.
My SO's mother was mad at me once for something that I had no idea about, and she called him into the living room where she whispered, aka yelled about me for 20 minutes. I was just sitting in his bedroom listening to her annihilate my character. The reason? He was spending too much time with me. We had been dating for 1.5 years at that point, and my grandmother had passed away the day before.
That's rough. It's tough when someone feels threatened by your relationship without any real reason. You were just there supporting each other, and then suddenly you're the bad guy. It's like, how do you even respond to that? Sounds like a lot of unnecessary drama. I hope it didn't cause too much strain on you and your so. People can be strange about who others spend their time with.
Used to referee 5-year-olds playing flag football. The policy was when you grab someone's flag, you hold it up in the air, then I blow the whistle and the play is over. One play, see kid grab flag, raise hand, I blow whistle. Only as I'm blowing it, I realize his hand is empty, as he had unsuccessfully pulled the flag. Tell the kids to keep going, they're all very confused. Parents erupt. It was like after a bad call at a European soccer game. I'm American, I call it soccer. Yelling and screaming at me. At a game played by 5-year-olds, where no score is kept, no one wins or loses, and everyone gets a trophy. Ridiculous. Even better, I called the next weekend and boy am I glad. The ref coaching one of my games made a bad call. A parent got so mad he tackled the guy, and 2 parents were arrested.
That sounds like quite the experience. Refereeing kids can be wild, especially when parents get too invested. It's funny how competitive they get over a game where no one really wins. The tackle and arrest just take it to another level. Shows how seriously some adults take things that are meant to be fun. But hey, those moments definitely make for good stories later. Glad you're keeping it light though.
Watched a kid throw a major temper tantrum in a Ross store because he wanted to go look for toys, not clothes. Finally, the father had enough and threw himself on the floor next to his child and started kicking and screaming, wanting the boy to behave and how he was a horrible brat. The kid stopped acting out and started to try and calm his dad by saying, "Stop, Dad, stop. You're an adult," and embracing me. Funniest 20 minutes I have ever seen in my life. So TIL most childish ended up being one of the most smartest things I have ever noticed an adult do.
That's a wild scene. Kids can throw some serious fits, but seeing a parent join in must have been something else. The way the child shifted to calm his dad is kind of ironic. It shows how kids pick up on behavior, even when they're acting out. Moments like that really make you think about parenting styles. It's funny how the roles flipped, right? Just a reminder that adults can act just as silly sometimes.
In our office, in one room, we used to have desks that face one another where people proofread documents for errors. We hired this one guy who turned out to be a complete asshole to just about everyone. Then a year later, we hired another guy who had coincidentally come from the same company as the first guy, and they both knew each other. These 2 guys fucking hated each other, but often had their hours overlap. Sitting facing each other, they would put up barriers so that they didn't have to see each other. It always reminded me of when I put up a wall of cereal boxes so I didn't have to look at my brother at breakfast time.
That sounds like a classic office dynamic. It's funny how two people can clash so badly, especially when they come from the same place. The cereal box wall is a nice touch, too. Sometimes you just need that distance with certain people. It makes you realize how small things can create these little barriers in our daily lives. Honestly, I think we've all been there at some point.
I used to work at a certain orange big box store. I worked in the hardware section and was helping a customer with power tools. When I hear a man yell at the top of his lungs from the nuts and bolts aisle, "Someone help me, I need help," he wasn't in any kind of danger, he just throwing a fit. So once I finish with my first customer, I go to help him. He is visible distressed, and when he sees me, he starts yelling, "Where were you? I need help now." I say to him, "You have two choices, talk to me like an adult with respect, and he'll help you, or I'm walking away." That didn't go over well, and he continues to yell saying, "No, you won, you're gonna help me now." So needless to say, I walked away and helped other customers who knew how to act in public.
That sounds pretty typical for retail. Some people just have no chill. I had a similar experience at a store once. A guy was just losing it over a mispriced item. Like, dude, it's not the end of the world. I tried to step in and calm him down, but he wasn't interested. Eventually walked away too. It's wild how some folks forget basic respect when they're frustrated. Just not worth it.
I'm a nanny for these two kids, and they're awesome. I also love dogs, and their neighborhood is basically the doggy capital of Australia. People actually say this. I routinely say to them, "Ooh, let's go pet that one." Or, "Guys, come on, can we go pet those puppies?" I don't even care. I love dogs. Puppies will make Melt into a happy little 5-year-old. Besides, the kids don't mind.
That sounds pretty chill. Being a nanny and getting to hang out with kids and dogs seems like a good gig. It's nice that the kids are cool with your puppy enthusiasm. I get it. Dogs just have that vibe that makes everything better. Plus, it's fun to see kids excited about pets too. You're basically living the dream with those dog encounters. Simple joys, right?
Many years ago, I had a boss who used to throw himself on the ground, face down, beating his hands and fists on the floor in temper tantrums. Screaming, crying, bright red in the face. I would never know how to deal with it. Yes, I worked in politics. When my boss's boss became the prime minister, he got rid of my boss ASAP, sent him to South Africa, about as far from Australia as he could send him.
Sounds like a wild work environment. Dealing with that kind of outburst must have been tough. It's a good thing the higher-ups figured out he wasn't fit for the job. Sending him away seems like a drastic move, but I guess they needed to restore some order. Can't imagine how chaotic things were when he threw those tantrums. At least it created some interesting stories to tell later on.
I have a coworker who's pushing 70 who still flirts with all the guys in this sickening, stereotypical baby voice. She talks like that all the time, really, but it's extra gross when she does the whole playing dumb, teasing, middle school flirting bullshit with some married guy her age. She doesn't even make a lot in tips, so I'm not sure what she gets out of it.
Some people just never grow out of certain ways of interacting. It's kind of strange to see someone in their late years still acting like that. You would think they'd change with age. Flirting like that, especially with someone who's married, seems unnecessary. Maybe it's just a way to get attention. But at the end of the day, it's not really anyone's business. People will do what they do for their own reasons.
I used to have a coworker who would never just say please. It was always pretty please. No matter who she was talking to at what she needed to use please for, she always said pretty please. Then she couldn't figure out why she so frequently ended up dealing with angry people on the phone. Pro tip: if a person calls your company and is already upset/frustrated about something, speaking to them with the kind of phrasing you use with 3-year-olds is just going to make them more unhappy.
That's kind of funny. I remember a friend who did something similar. Every time she needed help, she'd say, "If you could, pretty please." It became a joke among us. But I get it. People already mad don't need that cutesy talk. It's like adding fuel to the fire. Eventually, she learned to tone it down. Sometimes you just need to keep it straightforward, especially in tense situations.
My first job was at a warehouse store, and one time my manager sent me outside to help settle a dispute between two customers old enough to be my parents, who were fighting over a parking space when there was an empty space directly across, same distance to the entrance from the one they were fighting over. I was so confused.
That sounds like a classic moment. It's wild how people can get worked up over little things, especially in a parking lot. I remember once at my part-time gig, I had to break up a similar argument about a cart. People can get really passionate about stuff that doesn't matter much. Seeing adults act like that was kind of eye-opening for me. Just made me realize how silly some things really are.
This reminds me of a play that my friend co-wrote/starred in, where they work as home decorators, and their boss has a long, tantrumy monologue because someone bought him rich tea biscuits. The audience were in stitches as he stormed about, swearing and pelting the biscuits at the wall. It was hilarious at the time, but disturbing to think how there might be some people genuinely like that.
That sounds like a pretty wild play. I've seen some performances that really push the boundaries of humor. It's interesting how characters like that reflect real-life frustrations, even if exaggerated. The reaction of the audience adds to the whole experience. Sometimes, it's good to laugh at the absurdities we face in daily life. Just a reminder that everyone has their off days, even if it gets a bit over the top.
God damn that man. I have a cousin who has learning disabilities. One thing you learn if you're close to someone with disabilities like this is that they do have developed feelings and emotions. They may have trouble expressing themselves or maybe slow in developing them, but they get hurt same as we do, maybe even more when they realized what they lacked. And what hurts the most is the fact that all of those with this disability have the purest and kindest of hearts, much more than us normal people. Sometimes I wonder who is actually mentally disabled.
It's interesting how we often overlook the depth of feelings in those with disabilities. Your cousin's situation really highlights that they experience emotions profoundly, often more than we do. It's a reminder that kindness and purity of heart can exist in unexpected places. Makes you rethink what we consider normal, and who really struggles on a different level. We could learn a lot from their perspective.
I had something similar, except I was on psychedelic mushrooms. My friend had literally no food in the house except for this tiny little lean cuisine pizza. We were both tripping sack and hallucinating wildly, and he decided to make the mini pizza. My face looked like a pouting baby, and I guess he felt bad, so he was nice enough to split the pizza with me. I grabbed the pizza slices and was going to lay in his dog's cage to eat them, not sure why. And halfway there, I dropped it on the floor. I picked it up and all the cheese fell off. So imagine the disappointment of that being sober. The mushrooms intensified that emotion about tenfold. I instantly started crying. I'm a 20-year-old male. My friend was just taking the entire thing in, and he said it was like a very sad movie. So then he started crying because he felt so bad for me. So just imagine walking into a room and seeing two 20-year-old men crying at half a mini lean cuisine pizza on the floor.
That's a wild situation. It's funny how those moments can feel so intense when tripping. I can picture the scene clearly. Two guys just trying to enjoy a snack, then everything falls apart. It's like the pizza was symbolic of something bigger. Honestly, seeing friends break down over something so small can be pretty touching. Sometimes the simplest moments hit hardest, even if it's just over a pizza.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.